Welcome to another Spring Showcase. Today we're partnering with Welsh Water and Costain to find out more about their HyValue from sewage sludge to biohydrogen project. So thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. For those of you that might not know me already, my name is Chloe Tooth. I'm the Comms and Engagement Manager here at Spring Innovation. For those of you who don't know anything about Spring, we are the Innovation Centre of Excellence for the water sector, supported by all of the water companies across the UK and Ireland, as well as the supply chain, with the goal of enabling collaboration, removing duplication, and accelerating innovation in the water sector. So we are the custodians of the Water Innovation Strategy 2050. For anyone who hasn't seen that document, we're going to pop some links in the chat to that in a second, and that lives on our website. It has 7 themes with challenges that sit under those themes that we want to be solving within the sector. We also put out calls for innovation against those themes. So through our Spring Accelerator, over the next couple of months, we will be launching our Spring Accelerator 3 around the theme of enhancing and protecting natural systems. So it's worth keeping your eye out on our socials and things for that, for when that goes live. But today's service offering is about knowledge sharing, so we have 2 aspects to that. The first being our knowledge library on our Spring platform, and there's a bank of over 45 case studies for you to go and learn from and utilise on innovation projects across the sector, with over 80 more case studies in the pipeline. So this is constantly being updated, so please do register to the Spring platform and go and check that out. There'll be a link for that in the chat also. The showcase recordings for a number of those projects and any supporting links or documentation also sit alongside those case studies, so be sure to go over and check that out. So this is a 2-hour knowledge showcase event where Welsh Water will do a deep dive into the HyValue project, share the results and lessons learned and overcoming the challenges faced along the way. We're happy to see that there are over 150 people registered for today's event, with representatives from Australia and New Zealand too. So welcome to the call and thank you so much for joining us. Today, you will learn a little bit more about how hydrogen could be further utilised within your company and how adapting a hydrogen economy can benefit your company as well as the environment. So super exciting one today. And this is showcase number 14 for Spring and the last one of 2023. And with over 2,000 people registered for these events, we're super happy and really proud at how these events are helping to disseminate knowledge from these innovation projects and accelerate learning across the sector. So these showcases are all about how you guys are able to learn a little bit more about the project, take away those learnings and that knowledge and be able to embed those in your organisation. So this being said, we will be launching a poll at the end of this showcase to find out how interesting you found the information and also whether you're hoping to go away and use that afterwards. So when that comes through, please do submit your answers at the end of this event, and that's really useful for us follow-ups after the showcase. So on to today's session, I'm just going to run through the agenda and introduce our speakers before I hand over to Tony Harrington to kick off the showcase. So obviously we're going to introduce the speakers, we're going to introduce the project, a little bit of context and value behind the project, some further information, a project review, go into lessons learned. It's really important that we cover the lessons learned today, and then into a short break, usually 10-15 minutes, and then we'll come back for questions and answer sessions at the end. So just to introduce our speakers and the team for today, so we've got Tony Harrington, the Director of Environment at Welsh Water. We've got Andrew Dixon, Head of Energy Efficiency at Welsh Water. We've got Ian Hullen, Energy Analysis Generation with Welsh Water, and we've got Gareth Davis, Principal Consultant Front-End Solutions at Costain. So I'd just like to pass over to Tony Harrington to do the introduction to the project today, and thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Chloe, and a huge welcome to everybody, particularly if you're joining us from the other side of the globe. Perhaps I should say good evening if you're in Australia. It's really great to be here today hosting this particular event. I'm the Director of Environment for Dwr Cymru Welsh Water. I've been working now for more than a decade in that role. I also look after innovation, research and science for the business, happens to be in the portfolio, and I also am a founding director of Spring. It's an organisation which I'm hugely supportive of. We've spent far too long in the UK water industry effectively trying to compete around innovation, whereas what we should be doing is efficiently sharing our knowledge, developing our technologies together, making sure that everybody is on board and at least able to apply the technologies that we develop in one go. There have been times where companies here have been trialing in isolation, effectively, exactly the same technology, as many as 7 companies or 8 companies trialing the same thing at the same time, which is fantastically inefficient. There has to be a better way of moving the technology advancement forward at a faster pace than we have been doing, and certainly at a lot less cost than we've been doing it in the past. So it's great to have this showcase on hydrogen. I personally, my belief is that we will be producing hydrogen as an industry within 10 years, whether it's from the methane that we produce at our anaerobic digestion plants, or whether it's from electrolysis of our final effluent after suitable treatment. I can see sewage treatment works being hubs for hydrogen production that we will use to power our tanker fleet in particular, that we can sell commercially for other types of transport, whether it's trains or other tanker fleets or bin lorries or wherever it happens to go. But hydrogen is definitely one of the core energy building blocks for nation states to combat climate change into the future. So it's really great that we're at the cutting edge of this and that we're looking at production of hydrogen from biomethane that we produce, which at the end of the day is an almost limitless resource. We'll certainly have sewage indefinitely, so hopefully we'll have hydrogen indefinitely. And if we can produce it cost effectively, then I think it bodes really, really well for us as a sector and indeed as a species. So that's all I really wanted to say. I just welcome the other speakers, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the project. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Good morning and good evening as well to those joining us on the far side of the world. Absolute pleasure to be hosting and speaking with you today. I'm Andrew Dixon, Head of Energy Efficiency. Thank you for the introduction earlier. It's an absolute pleasure to be talking about our HyValue from sewage sludge to biohydrogen project. And this is my colleague.
My name's Ian Hullen. I'm the Renewable Generation Energy Analyst. I was delighted to be brought aboard with HyValue. Fantastic learning experience and look forward to presenting to yourselves.
Yeah, so we've got, again, our colleague Gareth from Costain as well to speak later. One of the first things that is kind of fundamental to all the work that goes into our hydrogen strategy and underpins some of the reasoning behind why we've pursued HyValue as a project is Welsh Water's net zero plan. So we have a short video to give you some context background now. Thank you.
We are experiencing the impact of climate change on a global scale. As a result, Welsh, UK and international governments have already declared a climate emergency. Climate change affects us all, putting more and more strain on our ecosystems, economies, communities, infrastructure, and the health and well-being of both current and future generations. It transcends political and social boundaries, and it's often those in vulnerable situations who are impacted the most. The only way to tackle this is if we all work together.
As one of Wales's flagship companies, we're proud to commit to delivering net zero carbon emissions by 2040. This isn't simply a target in relation to infrastructure or operational emissions. It's about changing the way we think, plan and deliver. We're a socially responsible company with a clear purpose and vision to earn the trust of our customers every day. It's about taking responsibility for managing the biggest challenge of our time, which is climate change, focusing on the long term and ensuring we protect our customers, our communities and the wider environment, whilst leaving a fairer future for generations to come.
Welsh Water provides essential public services in the management of the water cycle, to over 1 million homes and businesses. That's over 3 million customers across most of Wales and some adjacent parts of England. This requires processes and activities which not only rely on the environment, but have a direct impact on it. We are committed to ensuring that our operations do not adversely affect our land, rivers and seas, and that we become a truly world-class, resilient and sustainable water service for the benefit of future generations. And as the climate changes, we need to adapt the way we deliver our services to allow us to deal with the challenges brought about by our changing environments for years to come. Having already reduced our total carbon footprint, including the carbon emissions from our operations by approximately 65% since 2010, we know what it takes to get this done and have some great examples of initiatives which are making a real difference already. We chose an ambitious, proactive response to achieving a net zero future. We are committed to reducing our total carbon emissions by 90% by 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2040. Our journey to achieve this will focus on 5 key areas: harnessing nature, saving water, powering a cleaner future, tackling fugitive emissions, offsetting carbon. This is a long-term project, one where we'll need to change, adapt and innovate to achieve our targets. But we are committed to delivering net zero carbon emissions by 2040 to protect our customers, our communities and the wider environment for now and for future generations to come. Welsh Water, for you, not for profit.
Hopefully you found that video informative, and our pleasure to move forward now into our presentation. Here we go. So what you can see now is a more detailed overview of the strategic pillars referred to in the video just now. Now, these strategic pillars can be considered the what of our net zero strategy. So what are we hoping to do? These are very aspirational strategies that we have. Naturally, they'll be contingent on the price review process and funding that we're able to eventually allocate to the different areas. But we're really excited to have these stretching hopes that we can deliver and work towards our clear commitment to be net zero by 2040. To give a bit more detail around these different strategic pillars, we have 6 work packages which I would describe as the how we will deliver our net zero plan, which comprise 6 different areas. We've got fossil fuel reduction, electricity reduction, capital carbon, process emissions, fleet emissions and land management and carbon sequestration. So the fossil fuel reductions, reducing our natural gas, diesel use, link very much to the powering a cleaner future and saving water aspects of our strategy. Reducing electricity is both around reducing our dependency on the electricity grid, being more energy efficient, but also what we can do in terms of delivery of new renewable technologies and innovative renewable technologies to displace that electricity from our operation. How we can reduce the carbon from our construction activities and what opportunities there are around harnessing nature. Those two are very strongly intertwined. When we talk about fugitive emissions, these are emissions that arise as a byproduct of the operational processes that we follow as a water company, and we're really excited and have some good plans around reducing our process emissions heading into AMP8, and there's various work activities underway at the moment. We have aspirations around decarbonising our fleet and then carbon sequestration and offsetting carbon. Again, what we can do working with our natural environment and how we can reduce our carbon footprint for the areas that are too hard to abate and not cost effective for our customers or the environment, to remove the emissions entirely. And this is a key part of Welsh Water's Race to Zero pledge that we signed in 2021. committing to uphold the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change commitments and reduction strategy with our science-based targets for reducing our carbon footprint. And you can read more about this on Welsh Water's Net Zero page, which you can find on the internet, and we can share a link afterwards. Now, I'll just pass over to my colleague Ian to talk a little bit about. Pardon me, am I going backwards instead of forwards? Here we go.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. This is a snapshot look at what energy generation was in Welsh Water in 2012 to 2013 in the blue, compared to what it is, or was rather, in 2012-2023. If you look at the first two columns, CHP, you can see a small improvement, but you've got to bear in mind that this is only the combined heat and power valorization of our energy from biosolids. So if you look at the next pair of columns, that is the new gas grid plant that we have in Five Fords wastewater treatment works in Wrexham, which utilises a permeation filter to separate the biomethane from the CO2 in the biogas and scrub it, clean it, add a little bit of sniff and inject it into the gas network. Next, you see a colossal increase in the hydro generation at DC Welsh Water. This is due to large acquisition of additional hydro assets, reclamation of our high-level raw water storage facilities to utilise the potential energy from the gravity that they can generate, as well as optimising the assets we have, as well as additional retrofits to water treatment works and some potable water pipe works. Wind, that is a 1 megawatt wind turbine that feeds Swansea wastewater treatment works and a 2.5 megawatt wind turbine that feeds Nash wastewater treatment works. Very high reliability percentage on wind in the region of 98%, which feeds to energy intensive assets. As long as you've got 5 meters per second wind speed as an average across a year, then installing wind is a good option. And then solar as well, that's a large expansion of solar photovoltaic cells that we have placed over many of our assets and increased the efficiency of running them, moving more towards utilising all the potential solar energy that we receive and advancing the inverter technology that's associated with them.
Thank you very much, Ian. And moving on to talking a little bit more detail about the advanced anaerobic digestion process we follow. This is a means of treating our sewage sludge, so the basically the poo component of wastewater that we treat in our core operational activities. And what's really fantastic with advanced anaerobic digestion as a technology, I touched earlier about the different aspects of our net zero strategy. Now, if we wind back to this 2010 baseline, which we've set for our carbon footprint when Welsh Water became one operating entity for all of our operational water and wastewater activities, that carbon baseline had 3 key components that formed the vast majority of the carbon footprint for the business. The electricity use imported from the grid, the natural gas use imported from the grid for the sludge drying, and the subsequent process emissions from that sludge when it was recycled to land, and the carbon emissions from the vehicle movements to move that sludge to land. Now, what advanced anaerobic digestion has achieved for the water sector as a whole, and why we think it creates a fantastic opportunity for hydrogen, is that this already addresses those top 3 areas of the carbon footprint. It's an opportunity for more renewable energy generation by producing a biogas fuel which can be used for electricity or gas in a gas to grid plant or upgraded to hydrogen, which means we make a useful energy output, a useful renewable energy output from the processes that we have to follow to environmentally treat the sludge that is part of our core business undertakings. We then have, through the advanced process and the additional pasteurisation, treatment and breakdown in the digestion, a reduction in the volume of sludge that's recycled to land, which both reduces vehicle movements and the carbon emissions associated with those vehicle movements, and reduces the process emissions of methane that is residual within the sludge when it's recycled to land. So 3 key areas of carbon emissions for a water company can be addressed through this technology. And as we've seen already, combined heat and power is an established technology used to convert the biogas into electricity and heat for processes. However, what we have within the operation at our Cardiff sewage works, we have a population equivalent of 1 million served by our sewage works. It processes 100 tonnes of dry solids of sludge per day. We currently produce around 18 gigawatt hours of electricity and 19 gigawatt hours of heat every year, and the site consumes 40 gigawatt hours of electricity and 21 gigawatt hours of natural gas. Now, this is the real opportunity for further innovation around what we can do, because this is still, despite all the improvements and the carbon reductions to date, a source of carbon emissions which we would like to further improve. So again,
Ian. Yeah, so leading into why we are looking at diversifying, like Andrew said, established combined heat and power portfolio. Firstly, look at the Y on the left, the ROCs, that's renewable obligation certificates. They are due to run out at the end of their 20-year life cycle. That is a government-funded tariff for the generation of renewable electricity, which has been a large financial benefit of running the CHPs. The CHPs themselves, obviously, they're machines that spin around when explosions happen inside them, so they are quite maintenance intensive, and they are starting to show their age somewhat. Grid decarbonisation, offsetting electricity is not the carbon win that it was perhaps when the CHPs were installed. Towards the end of last year in the UK, we generated half of UK's electricity demand for wind power, for example. So while that would have challenges to the DNO, the DNO itself is not as carbon intensive as it was when we were almost entirely reliant on fossil fuels. And additional carbon zero targets, as we've touched on, we could be able to get there faster with alternative technologies. So when we look at the alternative technologies, or the how, gas to grid, like I said, we already have a gas to grid plant in Five Fords in Wrexham. This is where the biogas is separated from permeation, filter, and additional scrubbing, with some gross calorific value manipulation before being injected into the grid. Pyrolysis, we've been privy to a number of schemes regarding pyrolysis as an opportunity to generate energy from the waste stream. Volatile fatty acids as well have started to come up as innovation schemes. Dryer would be going back to the old technology, possibly not ideal as we moved away from it in the first place. Electrolysis, that's the splitting of water, H2O, into its component hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Ultrasonics is a method to improve the bioavailability of the biogas when you're treating it in advanced anaerobic digestion, well, particularly anaerobic digestion. We have a trial ongoing at the moment to see its validity in advanced anaerobic digestion in post-THP processes, or steam methane reformation with carbon capture, utilization and storage, which is the focus of the HyValue project.
Thank you. So just to add to the points Ian's made, in the last 10 years, the carbon intensity of the electricity grid has dropped by over 40%. So the benefit in terms of carbon emission reductions or additional benefit in terms of carbon emission reductions that the water sector can play through renewable electricity is diminishing, whereas the carbon intensity of natural gas in the grid, which is still very much core to our processes, our sludge treatment activities with the advanced digestion, has been fairly consistent. And one of the fantastic opportunities here is how we displace that natural gas, or potentially vehicle fuel, which was the focus of HyValue, with diesel and vehicles being even more carbon emission intensive. So what we were hoping to achieve and establish in this feasibility project was to answer some essential questions. Can we produce commercially viable, high purity biohydrogen from biogas? We looked at combining high technology readiness level solutions. So steam methane reformation is widely used on natural gas, but it is not widely used elsewhere. Whereas, again, building on Ian's point about gas to grid technology, we effectively already produce natural gas as a water sector. It's not such a big step, perhaps, as it's feared to be. It's uncertain, it's innovative, but we're already producing natural gas. It's really a case of who wants to make the first step and add this established technology of steam methane reformation to the biomethane upgrade processes that are already established across the water sector to, in our opinion, enhance the product into hydrogen. One of the key benefits from the steam methane reformation process and hydrogen production as a technology is that it's carbon capture, utilization and storage ready. So instead of having a biogenic fuel, a fuel where the carbon emissions associated with our raw biogas are already inherently very low because of the short cycle of the carbon dioxide within the atmosphere, instead of having incredibly low carbon emissions in its base case, should we say, its current case of operation, by capturing the carbon dioxide, which is separated from the hydrogen in the production process, it becomes a carbon sink, which is a phenomenal step change in carbon emissions and a real benefit for the environment. We've utilised the University of South Wales and Costain's expertise on hydrogen, and we have some proposals to take this project forward in a second phase with suitability of the technology in more detail, confirming the environmental, social and governance benefits, are really quantifying the environmental credentials and sustainability credentials around what is, although I say a high technology readiness level solution, it's a limited experience of putting all the pieces together in a single project already. So that's where the innovation really comes in to its own. We would like to gain practical experience of hydrogen in appliances and the quality criteria, and we've spoken with another company called Julemco on biohydrogen vehicles and the opportunities that can create. One of the key associated benefits, although we focused on carbon today, key associated benefits we've established in this feasibility is that air quality can be improved. So whether it be biomethane or whether it be diesel, there are still oxides of nitrogen and oxide of sulfur emissions that arise from the combustion of the natural gas or hydrogen, and with cities in particular having challenging air quality targets, there's a fantastic opportunity to address this and achieve wider benefits than just carbon reductions and net zero. Our feasibility scheme identified the overarching process here, which, as I've touched on, we've got a established gas to grid technology, established digestion technologies, but the key opportunities here are how we align and integrate this with established technologies outside of the the water sector's current expertise with steam methane reformation, and we've got some information here on how the energy yield can be improved slightly, but a notable reduction in the carbon emissions associated with the technology. So this is where we're really fascinated and think we've got a great feasibility outcome around hydrogen utilisation, and some facts around the opportunities with performance and comparable with electric vehicles. There's some efficiency benefits with electrical vehicles, but range and mass ratio with hydrogen mean it could lend itself very well to the water sector and heavy goods vehicles. Linking to the government's hydrogen strategy, this we see could only be a growing opportunity in the future. So really excited with this, and yeah, great to see how the water sector can potentially further contribute to decarbonisation. And to give a bit more detail on those 4 next steps we talked about just now, these are the different work packages we'd look to develop in a phase 2 to build on the feasibility that we've covered up to now. So Gareth, may I hand over to you now, please?
Sure. That's great. So I'm just going to go through a review of the project and some lessons learned. It's quite a whistle-stop talk. We've been working on this since 2020 on and off, so there's plenty of work to review here. Have the next slide, please. So just a quickly overview of why hydrogen in the first place. It's got sustainable benefits. So, you know, Andrew's just talked through some of the net zero benefits there. Obviously, hydrogen doesn't contain carbon in the first place. And in terms of its use, you basically only get water vapor produced. So you can get improvements in air quality as well from nitrous oxides, particulate matter, and sulfur dioxide as well. So it's a flexible fuel for heat and for transport. So we have looked at applications for domestic heat ourselves, and actually as a spin-off from this project, an industrial heat, as we'll cover later. But in transport applications, it's got quite a wide potential. You can see there the Costain's hydrogen car being fueled in the photo. But I mean, there is potential for hydrogen in the private car market, but probably only for people that are really heavy users, large mileage. The advantage there being that the fill-up times are really quicker, and as you can see, it's like a service station type environment. You fill up in 2 or 3 minutes, so it's quicker than an EV to charge up, and also the potential range is longer. Generally speaking, there's more reason to consider hydrogen the heavier the vehicle or the plant. So, you know, if you're moving into bin lorries or buses or construction plant, they've got really high power requirements, and so hydrogen is a better fit. Also HGVs, where, you know, they want to be on the road as much as possible, and obviously they're very heavy vehicles. Next slide, please. So we're just going to flick through a few of these slides, which are sort of you'll see them develop. And this looks like a horrendously complicated slide, doesn't it? What it is it was actually by Welsh Government. It's an attempt to summarise the energy system and how it might look in the future. And if you look at the bottom, perhaps just to focus on a few things, because it is a bit dizzying the amount of connections there are on the diagram. Some of the key areas are power use, heating for transport, heating for you know, industrial or domestic purposes, and also transport. And then if you can see towards the middle of the diagram, some of the key areas in which you can create that energy is from electricity, from clean gas, or from fossil-based natural gas. So this is just to try and show you the potential reach of a hydrogen project. So if we go to the next slide, please. Oh, well, we skipped it. Oh. Okay, that's great, that one. Thank you. So if you look at the yellow lines, they indicate the sort of transport users. So you can see straight away by connecting HyValue to end use for transport, there's quite a reasonable impact already at the sort of societal level by replacing natural gas, and particularly, that's those applications where changing it in for transport. But by 2035, it might be conceivable that hydrogen as a blend is on the gas network, probably as a blend with methane, natural gas, and that could have a far wider reach, potentially into heating, into power use, and as you can see at the top of the diagram there, into maritime applications as well. So there's very broad potential for this to have an impact on net zero. Next slide, please. Broadly speaking, just to cover some of the benefits, and it's in a slightly different way than Andrew covered before, and you can see there the slide on the right indicating some of DC Welsh Water's sites that already have anaerobic digestion, which is the basis of the project, ready to produce biogas that can be converted to hydrogen. But some of the benefits you see on the left-hand side there are in massive improvement, over 9 tons a year of CO2 avoided because switched to hydrogen. Very significantly, 137 kilograms, which is quite a pile of dust that would come out of the exhaust of vehicles, would be avoided, because obviously hydrogen's a clean fuel that doesn't have particulate matter that would be created from a diesel engine. There's obviously economic benefits, because we're trying to attract new businesses and green jobs, particularly to Wales. And it says that Wales is a hydrogen pioneer, but also, I mean, really the water sector has an opportunity to be a pioneer here. I think potentially, really, because of the potential for rollout is great, because obviously anaerobic digestion sites spread out well across the UK. So if there were a network of mini hydrogen plants, that would immediately create that network of hydrogen, potentially of service stations that could be serving society in terms of the needs for transport for hydrogen. Next slide, please. So an overview, perhaps a little bit of a repeat what Andrew was talking about before, but the biogas comes from, following the diagram at the top from the left, is produced from sewage sludge, which is currently stored in biogas holders. The idea is that we convert that biogas to biomethane, which is basically to take out the CO2, the carbon dioxide, and to create convert the methane into biohydrogen and capture the CO2 produced. So effectively, we're offering a carbon sink, really. And as you'll see on the next slide, the idea, one of the key parts of the project was that we linked together supply and demand, so the chicken and the egg. People talk a lot about this for hydrogen. If you don't, which do you do first? Do you start making the hydrogen, or do you start, producing vehicles? So we thought, well, we should look at the both together. So Cardiff Council were a really key and strong stakeholder, along with a lot of other local authorities in South Wales, who supported the project from very early on. And actually, as a spin-off from that early work, we ran a project on hydrogen demand on behalf of Welsh Government, looking at a whole range of stakeholders you can see summarised there, to look at basically, if we made 2 tons a day of hydrogen, could we sell it? Could we use it locally? So as you can see on the previous slide, we got on the BBC website, which was nice to see. We were getting some early publicity. So this demand assessment was performed by producing some models for hydrogen consumption based on 3 different scenarios, which are summarised in the graph in the top right there. We very imaginatively call them deep green, mid green, and light green. Those scenarios, looking at and based on a range of assumptions on the take-up of vehicles, and things like government subsidies and business models being favourable. What we found was, based on talking to specific organisations, interviewing and surveys, that in all 3 scenarios we found pretty quickly that the demand would exceed the supply. So it's a lot of justification there for doing the project in the first place. If you key uses that came out, summarised in the photos at the bottom. Traws Cymru run a bus from Cardiff city centre to the Cardiff airport, which runs 21 hours a day, because obviously the airport's running all the time. They really saw the benefit of hydrogen. South Wales Police were very interested in the potential for hybrid vehicles, which would burn a mixture of hydrogen and diesel. The benefit there being that you don't have to charge up a vehicle when it's needed for a critical response to respond to an incident. Also, we looked with Cardiff Council at Cardiff Capital Region, beg your pardon, at bin lorries, refuse collection vehicles, which have really a lot of machinery and a benefit, are well suited to hydrogen, and with Cardiff buses for certain routes, particularly the longer, hillier routes. Next slide, please. So in terms of the extended feasibility study that we've just taken away, this is the sort of a step in along the way of a 3 years work, really, and we've done an awful lot of initial scoping. We did an initial study for UKRI and a sustainability study that looked at well to wheels, carbon emissions, and estimated the impact, and from a sustainability point of view, and also looked at a comparison to the recent low carbon standard that's just come from UK government. But this was a pretty deep and wide extended feasibility study. Depending on your opinion, you might call it a pre-FEED, FEED being front-end engineering design, and you can see there that a couple of examples of some of the deliverables we produced, which are process flow diagram. We produced heat and mass balance, looked at electrical load, we looked at equipment list, we developed relationships with potential suppliers to understand the potential cost, and that was to look at the levelized cost of hydrogen over time. We performed a pretty extensive design safety study by our design safety department, and looked at layout and accessibility, which is obviously key in fitting the process onto the site at Cardiff. So some of the key findings were, firstly, that we're around what could we do with the amount of biogas we decided would be available. And we found that we could produce 2 tons a day, or 2,000 kilograms a day, of biohydrogen. That's enough to fuel around 100 fuel cell buses. So quite a significant amount of hydrogen, and in national terms might be sort of termed a medium-sized project. One of the key things that's come out for us is that, as Andrew said, all the elements are well understood. They're at high TRL. They're already in action. So biogas treatment, upgrading to biomethane, is already in action at 5 Fords. Conversion of biomethane to biohydrogen, well, that conversion is already done with methane around the world, and the steam methane reform is a well-established technology. It's been around for a long time, as it has compression and storage of hydrogen. One aspect that was a lower TRL, but was a very interesting technology for us, was to look at this potential mobile refueling technology from NanoSun, and this is called the NanoSun Pioneer. And as you can see there, basically the red tubes are hydrogen, sort of a clever instrumented and controlled, automated really, array of hydrogen storage vessels, and once full of hydrogen, the back of the unit could be the Pioneer could be deployed at a car park location, anywhere that was a safe place that had a hard standing, and provide a local source of hydrogen. So as use of hydrogen is slowly increasing, it's quite a good technology, because it means, a bit like, I don't know, in the old days you might have had a mobile library, that this could move around on different days and be available for people on different days. A pop-up hydrogen storage, you might call it. So in terms of the key findings of this piece of work, really, we found that the scheme's technically and economically feasible, and was able to produce hydrogen at a price that would be comparable and competitive with diesel. Overall, Cardiff East does appear possible as a site, suitable as a site, and we'll come on a little bit more to that and what we looked at. And based on some initial assumptions, obviously, for potential rollout across the UK, we could see 20,000 tonnes a year of hydrogen being produced from UK anaerobic digestion sites. So, you know, an opportunity to make a significant impact for the UK on net zero. We've also identified really strong stakeholder support, and that's been from local authorities, technology providers, and fleet operators. Fleet operators, including DC Welsh Water as well. Within that, we had a lot of discussion, and they were very supportive of the phase of work which we looked at for Cardiff Council, looking at the demand. The next slide, please. So to move on to some lessons learned, and you know, obviously there are a lot, and I've tried to pick some that would be perhaps most interesting to a general audience. One of the first things is resilience, and I think that's just sort of keeping going on sure on any project, isn't it? But I think it's particularly true when trying to innovate, because often we've found that we've been going for different innovation funds. We haven't always been successful over that 3-year period. We've been more successful than not, but you have to sort of keep going and believe that the technology and the idea that you're working with is a good one, and but also take that chance to, you know, improve it in the areas that when you get feedback from innovation scheme providers, that, you know, of where you might be needed to message more strongly. Very important to engage with key stakeholders and technology partners early on. So that's on this project was, for instance, talking to fleet operators, also to talk to as early as possible with technology providers for the reformer, for the compressors, for storage, for biogas treatment to remove the CO2. So we established those early and continued to stay in touch with people as and update as the project progressed. Really important thing to have an effective risk identification and management process. You can see on the right there, that's an image of for this project, the risk and opportunity register that we developed. Perhaps familiar to most of you, the red, amber and green of a way of identifying things. The blue ones are opportunities. So they were not really, you know, with doing this kind of work, often we focus on risks and what might go wrong, but actually a lot of things turn up that are opportunities as well. So that's a process of understanding the likelihood and impacts of potential risk, scoring it, and then that's the first column of colours, and then the second column indicates what would happen with that was mitigated, and the third column indicates where we got to at the end once the risk had been mitigated through the work, and we felt that we were pretty well managed. Some of the other lessons learned, obviously, for any project really, but is the challenges of fitting it onto a existing site for this full-scale facility. So this is producing 2 tonnes a day, 2,000 kilograms a day of hydrogen, and, you know, there was space and some options available to us at the Cardiff site, but you know, it has to be done carefully, and considering separation distances for hydrogen, accessibility, construction, all those kind of things were considered in the report we did. Also, a bit of a specific point was that for physical trials, which we were ready to move on to for the next stage, rather than having to design and build separate facilities, we did a bit of searching, and we're able to find a company called Kiwa who already have facilities for testing hydrogen. Were really helpful, and were able to offer us some minor modifications which would have made it suitable for us to test the technology with gas specifically from either Five Forwards or Cardiff on their facility, which was an SMR, and actually using the hydrogen in combustion. They were doing a lot of tests for boilers, for, you know, combi boilers in the domestic setting, but effectively it would have proven the effectiveness of the conversion technology with sewage derived biogas rather than natural gas, which would normally be used for their testing. Some other things just to mention quickly, I think I'm running a little bit out of time. So it's been a period of massive cost inflation. So that's been something that's affected the work as time's gone on. You know, you see things with 24-hour quotes now, well, maybe less so right at the moment, but the prices have gone up considerably. Business models change, and time is in with the third point really, that whilst we were under with the work, and actually in the in the throes of doing the sustainability study, the government announced the low carbon standard, so we had to adapt to that and do the assessment based on the draft of the guidance and regulation before we got the final figure of what the low carbon would be. Well, the level of carbon that would be acceptable to be defined as low carbon in the UK. Also important, obviously, like any other project, to consider permitting and consenting as early as possible, because those things can take time. So you need to find any particular bottlenecks or pinch points there. Next slide, please. We've looked at the fleet ownership models and how, well, what I really mean by that is I think that fleet ownership will be the key way that hydrogen vehicles are coming to the market in the first place. Private ownership seems a lot less important at the moment, and particularly that's because a lot of the vehicles are heavier vehicles. But also for things like vans, you know, companies like DC Welsh Water have got a lot of opportunity there to do conversion, maybe, you know, to the fuel cell solution or a hybrid combustion type technology for hydrogen. There's obviously massive value in using physical trials to reduce risks, so we were keen to incorporate that in our future work. And key to have, well, adequate safety procedures and systems on site. That kind of goes without saying. I've come from an energy sector background, and I know it's as important, obviously, in the water sector, but hydrogen presents some different risks in terms of, you know, potential for fire and explosion, and that not being familiar on a water site in the UK means that we need extra caution and care on that as things progress. And, you know, once we completed physical trials, looking at that in front-end engineering design would be, you know, mission critical, but also something that has been done a lot before in other applications. As Andrew said as well, there's opportunity for the project to be a carbon sink with carbon capture, CCUS, carbon capture utilisation and storage. It's a really interesting area at the moment. There's some large scale projects on the East Coast about to take off for carbon capture, which would store the carbon dioxide offshore. Perhaps the start of a real network for carbon capture around the UK. There are some challenges in terms of having to compress the hydrogen and find users for it if you're not going to store it. But one thing that's really good about this scheme is particularly the carbon dioxide that's captured from the biogas is particularly pure stream, which would fit well with a lot of the business models the government's developing at the moment. And also, lesson learned, there may be more opportunities than you first think. So about this time last, well, maybe this time last year, we were finishing off the work for this sister project, which basically takes the hydrogen production from HyValue and moves the hydrogen along a pipe to a nearby industrial heat user, and we were able to get buy-in from Wales and West and the local factory that was going to use the industrial heat in its boilers, or use the hydrogen to create industrial heat in its boilers, and that also was a project that which we were able to produce for DESNZ, which used to be called Bay.
Okay, so I think we're just going to hand back to Andrew really quick just to talk about some learnings on the Welsh Water side, Gareth, if that's okay as well. So he'll just go over some learnings for the next 5 minutes before we go to a quick break.
Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated, Gareth. And yeah, as we've touched on, there's a tremendous amount of lessons learned about the applicability of hydrogen and how there's a huge amount of synergies with the water sector core operations, but also wider opportunities outside of the water sector in which hydrogen can play a fantastic role in decarbonising for the UK, be it vehicle fuel or industrial uses. And hydrogen from this sort of steam methane reformation of sewage is an excellent source of low carbon hydrogen. However, this in itself is a really important learning outcome, because there's still a perception that hydrogen is a dangerous product. There's a perception that it's really complicated, that it's just too difficult right now. And one of the next steps I think I've certainly taken from this project is, how do we overcome those barriers and how do we communicate effectively around what an opportunity hydrogen can actually play and fulfill right now? There are certain challenges, and thanks Gareth for talking about the chicken and egg with, you know, does the production of hydrogen come first, does the demand for hydrogen come first? It's a real balancing act, but actually one of the things that we're starting to see is if people are willing, if businesses are willing to take the plunge right now, there's actually appetite out there for end users, there's appetite out there to make some meaningful decarbonisation steps right now, and comparatively well understood technologies to enable it. So certainly I think the communication and, dare I call it, marketing around hydrogen as a product is a really key lesson about how we can convey this to potential end users. Secondly, the other aspect which I think is really important, just to talk more broadly, is hydrogen learning for the UK as a whole. There is a tremendous amount of learning currently underway to verify hydrogen for use in industrial and domestic settings. Some cases, again, where there's public dissatisfaction, public nervousness around the deployment of hydrogen as a technology, and what does that mean for safety, end user perspective. But there's also a huge amount of research and standards available when it comes to the vehicle fuel application that we've talked about here. There's a tremendous amount of work already done on the control and the pressures and the integration of different equipment for how a hydrogen refilling nozzle, forgive the use of the term, but if you've got a fuel tank at one pressure, there's systems in place that you can't connect and refill from a different pressure rated hydrogen system. So the operation again of hydrogen is arguably safer than one might at first think, and this body of knowledge around hydrogen it can be more widely shared, and again that lesson and understanding and how we communicate this opportunity it's really innovative, but it's not as risky as people might think, is a really key step for me on how we take this further forward and how we can start to realise the fantastic opportunities around hydrogen, and specifically the opportunities that the HyValue project has identified. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so we're just going to go to a break. I think we're running a little ahead of schedule, so I'm happy to give us a 20-minute break. And then we'll come back for the question and answer. So the time at the moment is 3 minutes past 11. We'll be returning at 23 minutes past for the Q&A session. Please do feel free to keep posting questions in the meantime. Thank you all. Welcome back. So we're going to go into our question and answer session now. We've had some really great questions so far, but please do feel free to keep posting more in the chat should you think of any. Perfect. Okay. So the first question is from Laura. What purity of hydrogen is created from the conversion from sludge in this process?
I can take that one, but I suggest Gareth might be the best place to answer that if you're still with us, Gareth.
Gareth, you here?
Yeah, sorry, certainly am. Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of the hydrogen that's produced by the process, it's suitable for fuel cell vehicles, so that has to be people use the term 99.999. Actually has to be 99.97. But yeah, we were going to meet all those nines in our spec, because basically once you've gone through the conversion process, that then is purified. So it goes through a pressure swing absorber, and that produces very high quality of hydrogen. I mean, just to diverge a bit on that as well, the whole issue of quality is something that we would look at in future physical trials. That was something that was a risk that was identified, that was well managed, but that whether any minor contaminants such as siloxanes could affect the catalytic material in the reformer itself, or indeed in the fuel cell vehicles. So that's a sort of known but managed risk. There's a lot of guard beds that produce that act to remove these low-level contaminants. But yeah, I think I might have skimmed over this on one of the slides actually. They could, very low-level contaminants could have an impact. So it's something to be very conscious of. You can also, if you there's not much of a saving because you have to kind of have a separation process. But if you ended up with a different scheme, and you can produce 98% for combustion purposes because the specs are lower for that, because obviously you're just burning the stuff, so it's not as onerous. But yeah, it's very pure basically what's produced from this scheme.
Yeah, just to add to that, at the Kiwa facility when I visited there, they specifically set up to produce 98% grade pure hydrogen, as they only combusted, but even in their steam methane reformation process from food waste derived biogas and biomethane, they habitually hit 99.5+% purity themselves.
Amazing, thank you, Ian. And do you have anything to add, Andrew? Or
no, thank you very much.
Perfect. So the next question is from Aisley. What is the benefit of hydrogen production from biogas over electricity production from biogas over a 20 to 25 year asset life and energy efficiency point of view?
Fantastic question. So I think that the question can't have one definitive answer, because there may be some nuances for different sites. If we're specifically talking about a hypothetical sewage works, or indeed our Cardiff sewage works, taking the context that there's not already a plentiful supply of on-site derived renewable electricity, then there's some challenges around, okay, if we're going to displace electricity from a combined heat and power generation process, what's the cost implication of that versus the benefit of the financial value of the hydrogen? But what that kind of argument can overlook is that from an overall system perspective, a combined heat and power technology is not 100% efficient itself. How efficiently can the heat that is produced as a byproduct be captured? Is all of that heat being usefully used for processes? Is all of that heat being usefully used to displace natural gas use or other process fuel uses that might be needed to produce the biogas in the first place, as against the fact that you've got a well over 95% efficient conversion process to take the biogas energy into biomethane, and then minimal energy losses to convert that biomethane into hydrogen. The only inefficiency, if I can use the term in inverted commas, is that there's additional energy use to produce the additional steam for the methane reformation process. Now, what we found as part of this feasibility is actually you have a quite a compelling financial case for a project where there is an end use for the hydrogen that can be sold at a reasonable competitive price. So we talked about a commercial viability. If we're comparing the hydrogen end use to displacing diesel, for example, and what's the cost saving on diesel fuel versus the revenue stream if you're selling the hydrogen to a third party to displace their diesel fuel use as against the electricity, it does make a benefits case that would justify investment. I don't want to give a specific figure because of the way Ofwat look on our commercial performance as a water sector, but yeah, it's definitely a financially viable opportunity to switch over that sort of lifetime.
Amazing, thank you. Ian or Gareth, did you want to add anything to that? Or
you could add the twin capture carbon stream, potentially put a financial value on that down the line with our own use as a water company in the use of water treatment or in the sale of it if you upgrade it to full grade, or indeed just the value of capturing it.
amazing, thank you. So the next question is from Peter, who asked, how much per kilo was hydrogen from this study?
Again, Gareth, you might be best placed to answer this one. But...
yeah, that's a quick answer. £6.42 per kilo. We got to.
Perfect.
And which is just to add some context to that, that's a very favourable price compared to, you know, if you just compared the energy content of diesel compared to the energy content of hydrogen, that's a good price.
Amazing, thank you, Gareth. So next question is, what is the target cost per kilogram for hydrogen compared to other means of hydrogen production?
Yeah. So if I understand this question correctly, it's how can you value the cost of producing hydrogen from steam methane reformation against the cost of producing hydrogen from electrolysis? And like I was saying earlier, it's a little bit difficult to say, here's one specific cost for hydrogen from steam methane reformation. Obviously, Gareth can provide one figure specific to our HyValue study, but a different site which may have more or less on-site renewables, a different, you know, maybe even work with a third party that's supplying renewables through a power purchase agreement to the site. The electricity cost that is going into an electrolyser solution versus the natural gas prices, energy prices, and complexities around a digestion asset that's producing the hydrogen through a steam methane reformation technology, it's a little bit like comparing apples and pears. What we could say is, if you've got a plentiful amount of land, if you've got a plentiful supply of water, be it effluent, as Tony opened up by saying at the start, there's a number of ways other than thinking we have to take pure water straight out of the environment. Indeed, in some cases, that might not be the best outcome for the environment to place water stress on certain parts of the UK. But there's ways electrolysis can be made incredibly cost effective, but you need land, you need other enabling factors to do that. Whereas with this overall solution, and as Ian just said, potential future opportunities around commercialising carbon dioxide, in addition to the revenue or cost avoidance from hydrogen, you can have a very cost competitive solution for deploying a hydrogen technology. So like I say, sorry, I can't give you a definitive, this is, you know, X percentage better than the alternative, but hopefully I've answered your question. Please, if there's anything you'd like me to clarify, do come back.
Perfect, thank you. Gareth or Tony, do you have anything to add to that all, or?
I was just going to say, part of the point of actually doing full-scale trials on this thing is actually to bottom out some of the numbers and efficiencies and so on. And it's nothing like doing it for real at scale before you get really confident in all of the facts and figures around its efficiency and so on.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah, I just thought to me that obviously I quoted a specific figure there. It's got all sorts of assumptions based on the model. It's specific to the site, as Andrew said. you might broadly say something in the range £8 to £12 might be a typical price for hydrogen. Things changing fast at the moment because of the way that the government models are coming in and the rate of change of cost of things. But it was in a favourable place as a project.
Amazing, thank you, Gareth. So next question from John is, would it be advisable to use biogas to generate steam for THP and use the balance to generate hydrogen, or would we convert all biogas to hydrogen and then use some of this to generate steam?
That's an excellent question. Again, adding to Tony and Gareth's points, there's an element of further verification that full-scale trials would provide to kind of substantiate the answer better to this. But more broadly, there's effectively two points. There's limited, if any, treatment needed in terms of biogas to be used in raising steam for a thermal hydrolysis plant. So if we're sticking with the water sector application, you've got a very low cost solution to raise the steam for the production of hydrogen by using raw biogas to make the hydrogen. The flip side to that is you could put it through the hydrogen process and then use hydrogen to raise the steam. And again, without having a specific answer, there's additional steps, there's additional processes, the additional steam used for that additional quantity of hydrogen. There will be a marginal cost for the conversion of that biogas to hydrogen that would not be there in the case of using raw biogas. However, I think it will more come down to an individual organisation's appetite or willingness to pay for the conversion of that biogas to hydrogen in the thermal hydrolysis plant, because one of the points we touched on earlier is around the air quality benefit. So if we've got hydrogen as a fuel and that is able to produce the process needs in, for example, a fuel cell solution, then that would be a chemical reaction that would not have the oxides of nitrogen, the oxides of sulfur, and the associated air quality impacts, the associated permitting considerations, potentially permitting issues for the asset and its future operation, as against using renewably derived biogas would deliver a carbon benefit, but a carbon benefit only.
Amazing, thank you, Andrew. Would anybody like to add to that at all, or? Nope, perfect. So moving on to the next question, which is, with all the CO2 capture technologies, can you provide an insight to your carbon storage and use / sequestration strategies?
Thank you so much. And I think the answer to that is, in development, we're very open-minded to opportunities. Again, one of the key steps for a detailed design and building on the feasibility work that we've done is what exactly might the end uses carbon dioxide be. There are market opportunities there. CO2 is a commodity that is used in a number of sectors, so there may well be in the future a commercial resale value for that, which gives an income stream and improves the financial performance and benefits case of a steam methane reformation and hydrogen facility. However, the flip side to that is it may be most beneficial for some assets if they've got a large scale carbon capture facility locally. Then again, there may be cost premiums on the treatment and an upgrade of a CO2 stream to get it that bit further from the high purity that would be produced as a byproduct in steam methane reformation to a commercial saleable product. That may not be be the right solution for another application.
Perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
I just add a bit onto that. We're seeing development in carbon capture at the moment. There's a couple of the Track 1 projects on the East Coast are going ahead at large scale to sequester carbon and depleted oil and gas reservoirs. I personally, I've worked on a couple of studies just in recent weeks looking at local specific opportunities for carbon capture. Those projects had a specific place that they could send the carbon dioxide rather than sell it. But bit by bit, you can see a picture that there's starting to be these a small network of projects which will grow, and potentially you could see you can start to see that a network for carbon capture will happen. In the case of South Wales, probably going to be reliant on potentially reliant on moving the CO2 potentially by either a road tanker or pipeline, and then shipping the CO2, which sounds quite convoluted. But if you look at the projections for the carbon price, people are going to be fighting to get their hands on CO2. So if it evolves as is currently planned, the really high purity CO2 stream, which we're generating from biogas treatment, would be a very valuable stream from a point of view of the carbon price. And just to add on to Andrew's previous point about the energy efficiency and whether what we should do with the gas or relative heat users on site, also remember that there's a potential. This is the high temperature process, so the flue gas from the reformer's furnace is at a very high temperature, so that the heat from that could also be recovered and made use of on site for processing.
Thanks so much, Gareth. So next question from Frederick: will HyValue be aligned to green taxonomy and eligible for sustainable finance?
Again, Gareth, that might be a great one for you to lead on the answer.
Well, at the moment, there's no great advantage offered for transport for hydrogen, but this project has the benefit of having a readily available feedstock, which helps the economics a lot. The key thing I think for us was to get to the carbon, get very close to the low carbon standard, and in some scenarios below the required level, because that in the future I think is going to dictate which projects will fly. So this was being obviously biogenic carbon is low carbon to start with. If you had carbon capture as well, it would actually be a carbon sink, so obviously would be very, very attractive from that point of view. So yeah, I think that's what that is really about.
Yeah, I think just to add to the point you make there, Gareth, it will potentially come down to even further development and evolution of the government's low carbon hydrogen standard. So if we're talking about applications of producing hydrogen through steam methane reformation, but outside of Welsh Water's HyValue project specifically, so maybe there's a food waste digestion facility or another biogas producing facility, but it's taking products with a gate fee and bring them in from a large number of locations to provide that raw biogas to then be upgraded to hydrogen. There will be, and I don't know the detailed answer to this, but there will be some considerations around the boundary of the carbon for the carbon hydrogen standard, and how much of the transport and the vehicle movements and all those associated operations need to be factored into the calculation of the carbon footprint for the hydrogen being produced. So I don't think it's possible to definitively say that every steam methane reformation site using biogas would meet the low carbon hydrogen standard. Gareth and colleagues did some great work to help answer that. There's a number of reasons why we think that the water sector and at Cardiff we can, but that may not be the case for everywhere.
Amazing, thank you, Andrew. So the next question from John is, hydrogen is economically feasible against diesel, but what about the electricity generated from the biogas?
Thank you so much. And yeah, another great question. Thank you. It's a really interesting comparison. And again, it comes down to how the project is valued within the organisation making the investment, because the carbon benefits associated with electricity are diminishing, and as the UK electricity grid is on its trajectory out to 2035 becoming ever lower carbon, then the benefits from a combined heat and power generated electricity source are equally reducing over time. Now, that's not to do down on the environmental benefits of that renewable electricity generation, but on an organisation which has a specific metric around its carbon reductions, and an organisation which has an internal price on carbon, there may well be more facets to the business case than simply this is the electricity price and this is the hydrogen price, and how comparative are the two. Obviously, we look in recent times with energy security pressures and the tremendous step changes in electricity prices on the wholesale market that we've seen in the last couple of years. It would be incredibly challenging for, in that specific scenario, electricity not to be a more financially lucrative product than hydrogen. But yeah, over a long-term solution factoring in carbon benefits as well, there's a really compelling business case to say, yeah, this hydrogen solution is a great one for investment.
Thank you so much. Gareth, Ian, Tony, do you have anything to add to that or?
Gosh. Very short answer.
Yeah, sorry. But just for some figures in case you didn't know, ideally a combined heat and power engine would be around 43% electrically efficient, so it's not a direct energy comparison compared with the 98 gas to grid and 95 steam methane reformation conversion process.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so next question from Bonner is, what impact will diverting biogas away from CHPs into H2 have upon the operating of Cardiff Water Treatment Works itself? And how do the incentives for G2G, i.e. pumping biomethane into the gas grid, match up against manufacturing and selling H2?
Excellent question. I think there's a couple of things to consider with that, because you've asked specifically around incentives, so renewable support schemes that are available. Now, there is a what's the term I'm looking for? A support scheme called the Hydrogen Business Model that can provide support for generation of hydrogen as a technology. Now, that's a formally based Department for Energy Security and Net Zero scheme that people can accredit to and develop projects to align to. Now, the stipulations of that, again, there's requirements around low carbon hydrogen and ensuring the environmental benefits are there to achieve the financial support. But in contrast, the renewable obligation scheme is closed to new entrants, has been closed for a number of years. The first phase of schemes that are accredited under the renewable obligation will stop receiving support from 2027 onwards. So the future incentive schemes available for renewable electricity, there aren't some of the schemes that have been there in the past. And then in terms of gas to grid, the green gas support scheme, there's nuances with that around whether the digestion assets are pre-existing or not. So If it's an asset developed from scratch to produce biomethane and or hydrogen, there may be green gas support scheme incentive available. But if this is a retrofit to an existing digestion asset, excuse me, if this is a retrofit to an existing asset, which arguably there may be an environmental benefit to continued operation, higher utilisation of an existing digestion asset, as opposed to somebody building a brand new concrete digester somewhere and all the embodied carbon that goes into the construction of a new facility. That's actually outside, as in the existing digestion facilities are actually outside of the incentive funding for green gas support scheme. So there's a little bit of project specific diligence on exactly what incentives would be available on a project by project basis.
Perfect. And she's added on to that by saying the other question is, how will the supply and demand of H2 be managed on a daily basis? Does H2 need to store in any sense? What are the impacts on zoning of handling H2 at a wastewater treatment works?
Wow, three questions in one. So
yeah, which you're going to give to me, I think. Thanks. I'll say thank you 3 times. So the first question was about storage. Yeah, yes, you would need buffer storage. We did look at storage on the industrial heat project recently. That needed less because it has a much more flatter demand. So that, because if you've got a constant demand from a factory, you only needed enough storage to cover an outage a few hours. And you can also change the pressure in the pipeline a little bit and what they call line pack. So you can get a little bit more storage, effectively use the pipeline as a storage vessel as well. For the transport case, yeah, we did quite a lot of work on this, particularly early on, looking at storage models, looking at, which is surprisingly complex, looking at the storage pressure that you would use, which would be pretty quite high, could be as high as 450 bar, which is 450 times atmospheric pressure. That's because to get into well, it depends which vehicles you're looking at the end, but within the NanoSun technology, they were looking at 350 bar storage pressure in their mobile technology. We did a lot of work on. We talked to people like Oil for Wales, who are provider of service stations in Wales, and they gave us some guidance on how they might see the whole operation working. So we looked at how road tankers would need to visit the site to take material away, take the hydrogen away to sail, and produce quite a detailed model of that to produce an inventory that was. We had the target of making it. It ended up as a couple of tons, but by being less than 5 tons, it was less than being a coma site. So that's the control of major accidents and hazards, which makes life a little bit easier in terms of instrumentation and procedural systems, etc. But yeah, the next question was about zoning, wasn't it? So yeah, we looked at this on our safety study. We followed the kind of normal approach we would take in the energy sector when doing a gas processing job, which is do something called a hazard, which is a hazard identification exercise early on. We also did that really through the risk management process anyway, looking at the risk and opportunities. But then we did, in terms of the zoning, we would go through the same process as we would go through on a gas processing facility or an oil refinery, in terms of making sure that the equipment was ATEX compliant, and that one of the key areas there is hot surfaces. So if you imagine that, just to give you some context, that in the energy sector, there's an awful lot more hot processing than in a wastewater treatment plant. So you can see that this has been done before. There are a lot, there's obviously fired heat on a refinery. There's a lot of fired heaters. There's a lot of hot surfaces that would be a cause for concern in terms of zoning, and this has all been been done before. Obviously, there are zoning issues in terms of separation distances, and that would all have to be managed on a site by site basis. In terms of just to extend beyond the zoning as well, I mean, as part of the safety study, we did quite a lot of work looking at initial quantitative risk assessment and doing some initial modelling of what, you know, a bad scenario would look like if there was, for instance, a jet fire or a pool fire, and how bad that would be, because obviously we have to do that and assess that and then mitigate it by safety systems and by reducing the risk to an acceptable level. But the safety study didn't, you know, obviously turned out that this would be all acceptable and, you know, subject to the normal development of a project around gas processing. There was nothing overly to be concerned about there at this stage.
Amazing, thank you, Gareth. And final question from Ivana is, are Welsh Water being guaranteed a minimum price for H2 to stimulate investment?
Great question. Like I say, we've explored the opportunity around the hydrogen business model with the sister project looking at an industrial application. What we've identified in our HyValue project and working with the or through the value chain is effectively the need to engage with whomever the off-taker or off-takers will be to effectively, as you say, get that commitment that we don't have a chicken and egg, as Gareth said earlier, and have a supply of hydrogen with nowhere to go, or customers that are wanting to utilize hydrogen but do not have a source. Now, just to be clear, we've done a feasibility, so we've not got any sort of further commitments on a project to date. But you're absolutely right. An opportunity for how to develop a hydrogen scheme, steam methane reformation, or electrolysis hydrogen scheme would be the opportunity to engage with whomever is going to be the end user of that hydrogen at an early stage and find a mutually beneficial way of valuing that hydrogen and building a business case through the commitment and contracted pricing around that hydrogen.
Perfect, thank you, Andrew. Tony, Gareth, Ian, do you have anything to add to that at all? Or perfect. Fabulous. So I think we've got time for just one more question from Asley. Considering the level of sophisticated additional equipment and processes involved and energy efficiency is tend to be less when biogas converted to hydrogen.
The energy balance, so for is what?
Yeah, so sorry, I'll read it again. So considering the level of sophisticated additional equipment and processes involved, energy efficiency, does energy efficiency tend to be less when biogas converted to hydrogen?
I think this is touched on in one of the previous answers I gave, in that there are additional energy, or there is additional energy consumption in the production of hydrogen, in that there is some steam used to reform the hydrogen from the biogas, and there will need to be some sort of process heat to raise that steam, be it combustion of natural gas, be it a byproduct of heat from elsewhere in the plant, electricity or CHP sources, whatever that may be. And it depends very much on the specific site, because if using the combined heat and power comparison from previously, if the specific site has the opportunity to utilize all the low temperature and high temperature heat produced from a combined heat and power technology, then that has a very, very compelling energy balance with all of the electricity that's produced as well, as opposed to we have a very high conversion or efficiency, depending on how you want to look at it, of end product hydrogen as against raw biogas kilowatt hour energy. But how to reform that hydrogen there are additional energy inputs compared to the biomethane production, but depending on the application, if you're not having to dose propane to inject the biomethane into the grid, then there's an energy saving on the overall process there to contrast against the additional heat used in the boilers. So it's still a compelling overall energy balance. It's just, like I say, the site specifics may be subtly different in different applications.
Yeah, I think we landed on about 450 cube an hour for 2 tons a day for hydrogen, which would equate to we have 3 1.56 megawatt CHP engines there, still about 7 cube an hour at full tilt, so be effectively replacing one of them, doing about 70%. So you'd still be able to play with that, manipulate timing around energy prices if that were to become a factor and that were to become more advantageous, and you'd still have the heat from that process as well, like Andrew said, with the low temperature hot water system and the exhaust heat.
Perfect. Thank you both. So I think that wraps up today's showcase. I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody who's taken out time out of their day to join us today. We hope you found it as valuable as we do. Thanks also to the team from Welsh and to Gareth from Costain too, for sharing your project learnings with us so openly today. I think my colleague Kira has just popped a poll in the chat about today's session. So if everybody could please take a moment to just give us some feedback, that would be much appreciated. We'll be posting the recording of today's showcase on our platform along with the case study, and that should be available within the next week. I'll also post any questions that haven't been answered during today's event alongside the case study too. Yeah, so thanks again to everyone for coming, and have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.